this place, Henry. It's not just them. I can feel it.
This home is ours.
I can feel it.
Mama?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katya Woods. I am the coordinator for the African American Film Critics Association. Today, we have the esteemed honor to speak with the cast of the new Amazon's series, Them. I'm going to introduce you to the members, starting with my left. Reggie Ponder out of Chicago. Emmanuel Norsett, also out of Chicago. Brandon Jones, who's joining us from all the way in Germany. Coming now, Nancy Green. I believe you're in the Baltimore area. Okay. Ruben Peralta Brigade out of Miami. Sharonda Williams out of Atlanta. Carolyn Hines out of Toronto. And Rhonda Rasha Penrise, also out of Atlanta. Members, do what you do best.
Hello, this is Emmanuel Noisette, or E-Man from E-Man's Movie Reviews. This question is actually for Little. Look, a lot of people, the moment they saw this, they were thinking this is Lovecraft Country meets Us. But I was seeing like some other old school type of elements like Carrie and maybe Rosemary's Baby and stuff. So I was just wondering if you could just talk about your inspiration for bringing us this future masterpiece.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for seeing the references that were actually the real references. I think what people will be surprised by, especially people who made very quick judgments before they'd seen the show, no one who has actually seen the show has made those comparisons. But many, many people, and we've talked to many people around the world over the last couple of weeks, have made the comparisons to exactly the movies that you've mentioned. And that was intentional. I've been a huge fan of 1960s and 70s horror since I was a kid. Those movies you mentioned, The Exorcist, The Shining, all of those movies are massive inspirations to me. And the thing about that is folks who look like us never populated the centers of those movies. So since I was a kid, I was like, one day, like it's going to be a Black family, and stuck to it. And so here we are. But thank you for noticing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Ruben Peralta from Miami. My question, I know this show, it's amazing. I've seen it a couple episodes and I know it's gonna trigger some points, but like, what do you guys think is so important for the audience to feel represented on films? Like in stories like this, what do you think is so important to feel represented as an artist, as a creator, as an audience? Mr. Little.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, representation is everything. Because it's the world is diverse. We didn't just discover diversity. The world has always been a diverse place. It's just that the lens was warped, right? The lens in Hollywood for many, many, many years didn't show us in all of our complexity and our nuance and our humanity. So I think we want to see that. I know I was hungry for that, which is why I created the show. I wanted to see a Black family who was not only strong, but was also flawed and scared and angry and all of the feelings that all of us are as human beings all of the time. So, you don't realize as a kid, when I would look at these movies and I wouldn't see families that look like mine or people who look like me, you're being subtly erased from those things. You're being told that you can appreciate them, but they're not for you. You're not of those things. So centering this family at the heart of the story was honestly the most rewarding thing of this entire journey. Yeah.
It's still emotional to see us, like see our billboards, for example, and just see our faces just kind of just blasted. It's still an emotional thing. I know I spoke about the fact that growing up, I didn't really see a lot of women, a lot of girls and women who look like me on screen. And so it's really emotional for me to be that, and Shahadi can be that, Melody can be that, and Ashley can be that for other people, so.
And by the way, look at these faces. Who does not want to see these faces 100 feet high everywhere? It's the only
totally
thing I
agree
want
with
to
you.
see.
Thank you, guys.
Good morning, everyone. Kathy Woods, Cup of Social. My question is for you, Deborah. We get to see you as a strong woman, but at the same time grappling, with the decisions that her husband is making. You know what I mean? Talk a little bit about that journey was like for you as an artist. Because definitely women's roles have changed differently to step into like being more, okay, I don't really like this, but I support my husband, even though things are going really bad.
Yeah. Firstly, I love characters that are written multidimensionally. I feel like a lot of times women, especially Black women, are written on one note. And even when I get those roles, I still try to play them with different faces and different, because the thing that I loved the most about Lucky is, like you mentioned, she's strong, but she's also grappling with a lot of things. So she's strong and she's vulnerable. She's all these things. So that was just a dream for me. I think as far as the situation goes, I think it's a situation that a lot of people can relate to. Especially at that time, women didn't really have much of a voice. The beautiful thing about Lucky and Henry's relationship is that there was true love there, and there wasn't necessarily dominance there. And I think Henry really led with love, even though moving to Compton wasn't maybe the best decision, but one has to think to themselves, like, where would have been safe, actually? What could they have done at that time? So I just, I think that it was an amazing thing to kind of show on screen, that dynamic and her grappling with that decision and just kind of seeing him kind of make decisions for her. But just kind of keeping her head above water, it's just Lucky's a dream. Lucky's a dream. And she let me kind of explore times in my life where I felt kind of voiceless and finding my strength in those moments as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Caroline Hayes for So Here's What Happened podcast. So my question is for Deborah and Shahadi. And it has to do with representation for dark-skinned Black women on screen in particular, especially in a genre show like this. What would you say to other Black female fans of the genre about the concern that they may have about seeing violence being perpetrated against Black women and the mental and emotional torture that these two characters go through? What would the both of you say to women who may have concerns about that?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I understand. I understand that a lot of things we cover on this show are very triggering, they're traumatic, and they're supposed to be. But, I always feel like in order for people to understand fully the experience of a lot of women, you have to put it out there. You have to put it out there in a way that is unapologetic and raw. My thing is that, yes, I get that a lot of people will feel triggered by seeing the things that Lucky and Ruby Lee goes through. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of people who see that and feel seen and feel heard and feel like, you know what, I actually went through that. I actually had a lot of experiences on set where people came up to me and told me their experiences, that they could relate to certain things that Lucky was going through. And that for me is more important, So yeah, that's what I would say to them, is just stick with us and know that there is a greater, I guess, motivation, intention. I'm lacking the word, but it's for the good.
Exactly. Like you said, like it's raw and it's unapologetic. And I don't think that this story is here to make anybody feel comfortable, because none of the stuff that, that we're experiencing is, made up. Of course, like the story is, but like a lot of this stuff is real and is traumatic. And I bet that, Deborah and I can both pull from experiences that we had to, really go to really bring like an accurate performance to it. But like you said, I feel like people will be seen because this stuff is real, and I feel like people can really relate to it.
Yeah.
I understand what you mean, and thank you so much. And I love both of your performances.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Hi guys, I'm Reggie Ponder, the real critic out of Chicago for 91.1 FM. And Little, man, what you doing, man? What are you doing, dude?
That's literally what I said to him. I said
That's the only question that matters, Reggie. Thank you.
What are you doing? Yes.
I literally came up to him on set one day after one of the scenes, and I was like, "What is wrong with you?"
Thank you for helping me out with this, because I'm like, what are you doing? So here's my question, and I'd love for this for you, Little, but I'd love for anybody to chime in here, is that, are you trying to teach history, and are you trying to make a comment about how racism plays out today? Because I think you're doing a lot of that and kind of mixing it in, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you. First, give me that hat. That's my first statement. Secondarily, yeah, I mean, but rather than teach, I have to say this entire project was a learning experience for me. I mean, selfishly speaking, back in the very beginning of this journey, and I considered myself a student of history. I love history. I love Black history. I knew a lot about the Black Southern experience, the Jim Crow experience. What I realized very quickly as I was diving in to tell the story is I knew very little about what Black folks experienced moving to the cities of the East and the North and the West, and particularly to Los Angeles. There were tactics of terror used against Black families that were trying to integrate what had formerly been white neighborhoods that would have been just as at home in the Jim Crow South. And that to me was a shock, because I think that there's some mistake. And by the way, are you in Chicago, Reggie?
Yes, I am.
So you know, I mean, Chicago has a deeply entrenched history of redlining. The sad part about this is if you even have a glancing understanding of history, you realize I could have put this story in Chicago, I could have put it in Levittown, Pennsylvania, I could have put it in Rosedale, New York, I could have put it all across the Southland, and sadly it would have worked. So my hope is, just as Deborah and Shahadi so beautifully said, that folks feel seen. That even along this journey so far, and we haven't even gotten out there yet, I've had people come up to me and say, thank God you told this story when my family moved to the Fairfax district. Thank God you told this story when my family moved to New York. And it's already happening. And that's the only reason you make a story like this. You know, I wanted to honor and respect, as dark as our show is, as twisted as it is. You said, what's wrong with me? I know the show's twisted, but at the end of the day, we set out to make a love letter to those families. So yeah. And give me that hat.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Brandon Jones. I'm with LRM Online. My question is for Ashley. Ashley, one of the incidents that happened is they talked about the experimentation that happened with Black soldiers in the military. And I was curious, was that an incident that was known to you? And once you did find out about it, how did that impact your performance, finding out that this is a real thing that happened?
Yeah, I think I had an understanding on the surface of what had happened in terms of, I know there was a lot of testing going on with soldiers, but just Black people in general have been subject to experiments of medicine. And for me, it was quite traumatic actually to read all the stuff that had happened to the soldiers, to Black people in general, because these are things that were happening for the color of our skin. That actually they were using to benefit everyone. And Black people have never really been acknowledged in that way, the sacrifices that we've had to take for medicine that has benefited everyone. So for me, it was just like traumatic just reading that and everything else that I was reading.
Hi, I'm Nancy Green with Film Critique. And I just wanted to say, I really love this show so much. It was really intense. And one of the things that I really loved was how in acting there were a lot of micro movements that I feel like really showed the weight and intensity of racism, like that kind of just tension that we're constantly carrying, not knowing what's going to happen next, not knowing if the person that we're talking to is going to say something racist. And I wanted to know, how intentional was that in the directing and in the acting? Was there a lot of thought put into that? Because they're almost so small, you might not notice them in real life, but knowing what you're seeing. So I was curious.
I quickly say that, yes, that is very real. And I think for me, playing lucky, because, you know, as a Black woman, you go out into the world and you experience all the microaggressions, you experience all these things. And when you don't experience it, you're worried that you're going to experience it. And you don't realize how much you hold it in, and you just kind of show up and show up and show up and show up. And I think for me, playing lucky and just really allowing her to use every single bit of me gave me the opportunity to kind of let all that I've been holding in out. And I personally didn't even realize how much those microaggressions actually affected me in my life until I played lucky. You know, it was transformational at the least, to be honest. It's sad to think how much we experience on a day-to-day, how much we adjust ourselves just to kind of not, you know, be seen as other or be seen as them, right? It's, yeah. I yes. That's it. That's all I have.
Yeah, that's kind of like the same experience for me.
Yeah,
I mean, even though like I'm much younger, and sometimes I don't even notice it. Like my mom will have to come up to me and be like, "No, babe, that was racist," and like, you know, you really, really do not notice it. So I can't even imagine how Ruby Lee was feeling during all of her experiences in the show, and feeling like feeling so helpless, you know, and to have to go home and to have to not, you know, feel comfortable in her skin at all times, and not even feel comfortable around like her own family. It was just like, so it was heartbreaking, you know?
Yeah, and as parents, Lucky and Henry had to put on a face for their children. After experiencing all the experience in the world, they're supposed to somehow come home and parent.
And then I felt like Ruby was also putting on a face for Melody. I was about to say Gracie. Yeah,
I think the only one that wasn't putting on a face, I think, was Gracie.
Was Gracie?
I mean, that's real life, though, right?
That's just Melody.
That's just Melody.
That's real life for Melody, but she's probably the only one that wasn't putting on a face, and
exactly
tiring just because you're Black. You know, it's actually exhausting.
Exactly.
Nancy, you mentioned.
You don't realize how much go, Mark, go.
Oh, I was just going to say, Nancy, you said it beautifully, because you said micro moments. And I think people think that racism always looks like, you know, something terrifying or completely violent all the time. But there are other forms of violence, right? There's psychic violence. There's emotional violence. There is just, you know, there is the fear of being at, I mean, I've worked in corporate America for many, many years, so I know a thing or two about navigating all white spaces and the terror of that. Terror doesn't always come in the form of somebody who wants to kill you. It very often just comes in your day-to-day flow. And like Deborah said, you're constantly questioning, is this actually happening? Is this not happening, right? That's the double consciousness of basically just having Black skin and navigating this country. One thing for me that was really super emotional about this is we're just beginning. I mean, when I hear Shahadi say, like, I don't really know if this is or not, I actually think it's a beautiful transformation in a way that this next generation might be experiencing this a bit differently. Because what this makes me think, like, we're only just now having language for a kind of behavior, right? The word Karen. As trite as this sounds, that was not a word that existed for how many years, but it is indicative of a kind of behavior that we have all experienced. So what it does is it makes me think back to our elders, go back 60, 70 years where they not only didn't have the language to describe what was happening to them, even if they did not have the rights. And that's a terrifying thing to think about. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say how much, like, you have to hold it in and you don't know how it's going to manifest in you. So every day you're dealing with these pressures, and then it builds up, and then it has to have a release somewhere. And then sometimes that release, when you do eventually have that release, you look crazy, but it's because you've been building up, you've had this build up for years, or you've had a sort of like an encounter throughout the week that has just been building, and it's happened so many different times. And then when you do have that explosion, you're looked at like, yeah, like you're crazy. And I think that's what the piece spoke to as well, with some of the things that were happening like psychologically to the characters. And then you would see them manifest in Henry, and then you see them manifest in Lucky, in Ruby, and then Gracie Jean as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sorry. I agree. I think that's one of the things that the supernatural element of this show kind of represented is the things that no one else can see, but you can see. Yeah. And the gaslighting and the just, trying to explain to someone that this happened and it was very real to me, but then kind of look at you like, no, you're nuts. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's just, it is abuse in many different ways. And you're right, Ellen, when you said that, it can take on many different forms. And I think the show does a great job of exploring the many different shapes that it can take on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Sharona Williams from Pay Your Weight. This question is going to be for all of you, but I'm going to start with Little first. Following up on the previous conversation of how there's so many microaggressions that are happening to this family that really a lot of people in the Black community relate to, I want to know from a writing standpoint, because a lot of people, they will say this is very triggering. Especially at a time where it's just triggering to be Black in America right now with everything that we have to face. But I want to know, how do you balance that from a writing standpoint to make sure that you're not exploiting, the dangers that Black people face in society, but also too, for the actors involved in the show, how do you make sure that you decompress and detach from your characters so you can continue to exist without also laying underlying harm to yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, as it relates to the writing of this piece, I can assure you that there was never a point in our writer's room or in the experience of writing the show where a decision was made purely for the sake of being provocative. We never had the intention, how can we be provocative? How can we be controversial? How can we be hot button? The only questions we asked ourselves were, is it true? And does it scare us? And usually what we found is the most true thing was the thing that scared us the most. Right? So we focused on truth and let it lead from there. The fact is also that horror and true horror, like the movies that I was referencing from the past, they grapple with trauma. I mean, I think about a film like The Exorcist. I think it's one of the best films, not just horror films, but films of all time. And it's grappling with issues of faith. It's grappling with issues of interpersonal dynamics between a mother and her daughter. And Carrie, another movie that was referenced, traffics in sort of traumatic or triggering sort of episodes, because that is what horror does, right? It goes down to the subconscious, down to the id, and it allows us to kind of roil around in the things that we're not saying. So that was always the focus. It was never like, trying to be provocative.
Sorry.
That was it.
Okay. To your question about decompressing and how we basically took care of ourselves, I think that was your question. For me, one, I leaned heavily on the Emorys. Ashley and I would almost every single day that we shot together, we would decompress on the way home. Just like the day, we would just debrief. Therapy was a huge thing on set. We had a therapist on call, which was an amazing thing that I think should happen on more sets moving forward. And I utilized her very heavily. I got my own therapy, but to be honest with you, I didn't fully decompress until I was done. I always kept kind of one foot in Lucky because I just felt like, it's kind of like a sacrifice, right? Because I felt like this story to me was so important. It was so important that I tell it so as honestly as I possibly could. And I kind of needed to put myself to the side for a second and just really deep dive into her. And that required me just holding on to her for the time being that we were shooting, even when we were on breaks, even when it was the weekend, even when we, when other people were kind of like, okay, let me put this to the side. Like I felt like I needed to keep at least one foot in Lucky. And so, yeah, I didn't really decompress fully until I was completely done.
Yeah, similarly, I stayed in Henry for the whole time. Even during the pandemic when we had to shut down, it was about just making sure that the character existed so I could play it as authentically as possible. And when you was talking about decompressing, Deborah and I spent a lot of time together, just you know, just helping each other through the journey, and then spending time with the girls, spending time with Shahadi and Melody. Even on the weekends, we go to the cinema or into the movie theater and just, you know, just try to connect on that level. And then Deborah would actually take me to church. I hadn't been going to church for a while, and I found that very, yeah, very helpful, just to hear what you're laughing, but that's because
Shahadi, what are you laughing at?
Shahadi's just laughing. I don't know what, because I went to
sorry.
church. So
that is so Deborah.
yeah, so I was going to church, and to be honest, man, that was very helpful to me, because I felt like I lost my way with church and just making sure I would show up to service, and just hearing what the pastor would say is just very, very helpful and put like life into perspective for me, man. So that was very helpful in decompressing Henry, because as you could see from watching, it's very, very triggering piece, a very hard piece to play, and to have that fine balance of, you know, being emotional but having to be contained and restrain all the aggression and the trauma that was happening to the character, which I hadn't done in another role before.
That was like me too. I remember I would FaceTime you and Melody, guys, just so that I can kind of get back into that. I remember when we first started shooting again, everything just felt so familiar, you know, and it felt like I could just jump right back into it. And I feel like that was probably a good choice to kind of like keep parts of Ruby with me even while we were on the break, because I feel like it just helped us in the long run. But just for me, it was also kind of tough for me with my scenes, just because, you know, I'm still young, still growing, still figuring out how to have a good relationship with me as an actor, and then also, you know, me with my character. And I remember even like the places that we would shoot, you know, I think that Sophie and I were shooting in the asylum one time, and I remember first time that we walked in there, the energy, like my mom and I, we like did not talk the whole time. We didn't talk on the car ride home, and she was like, get in the shower now. And then she made me meditate. She saged the entire house. It was so crazy, you know. But sometimes that can be tough to kind of just like take yourself out of the character at the end of the day, because we would be finished with the scene, and I would be like, okay, scene done. Why am I still crying? You know, like it would feel weird. So going through with that, you know, like just still trying to learn how to create a good relationship with your character and the actor. It's just, it can be tough sometimes, but I'm so glad that I got the experience though.
Yeah, and I could tell that you were processing a lot, because I would ask you like, how are you doing? Like, listen, I know this is hard. You're like, I'm good. I'm okay. Like, no, it's not. We're going to the movies on Sunday.
We're going to the movies on Sunday. Yes.
But like, yeah, it was not an easy process, but I feel like it was worth it. You know what I mean? I feel like
most definitely.
As an actor, I feel like you're blessed to have those opportunities that require so much of you, and also are so effective, and you know will affect so many people, that you can really, you know, not only put yourself to the side for a second, but also work through some things that you didn't know were even inside of you through this character. So I feel like for me, Lucky was almost a bit of therapy for me, to be honest with you, you know, so.
We share that. I mean, we actually share that even as a writer. And I have to say that I to the first part of your question too, like our job, I think, as artists and as writers is to bear witness. It's to bear witness to the past. It's to disappear. It's not about you, actually. It's about honoring this past. And when I think about a scene like Shahadi's in the classroom, right, that was very much inspired by many experiences. But when I think about like young Ruby Bridges, who at 6 or 7 years old is flanked by US Marshals on her first day of school, while white folks who are middle-aged are screaming invectives in her face, are making jokes about her, that was a child, right? And it's always been a child. And so even though, yes, drudging these things up can be painful, I feel it's our duty as artists to just respect and honor those folks, because without young Ruby Bridges, I wouldn't have been able to go to the school I went to, right? So it's about, rather than just sort of rolling around in it, it's really about honoring those folks who led the way. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Like your backdrop.
Thank cute.
I want to get one of those. How do you
Or
guys
whatever. It's cute.
Shahadi, you got to teach me how to do these things. I don't know how to do that.
Right? Give you a little Zoom class. Yeah.
Tutorial.
Shahadi, is yours a backdrop or is that real?
That's my room.
That's real.
This is my room. I remember I called Deborah and Ashley when it was finished, and I was like, "Look at my room. Look."
Like, it's out of. I get to see journaling, like dear diary.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Looks like a set.
It does look like a set.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Hey, it's Rhonda. And speaking of, Ruby Bridges, like she's still alive. Like this is not something that happened like way, way long ago. She is still with us. But for little Marvin, I wanted to ask, from a person working in the industry, why do you think these stories are catching on now? Because in the last few years, we've seen a few of them. And also as a creator, I know you've alluded to this, but I want to get a more direct answer about what it gives you as a creator to be able to finally tell this type of story.
Well, I mean, just frankly, it's the biggest gift of my life that I've ever experienced to be able to tell this story. And I think, particularly with genre and horror as a genre has always had this amazing ability to unpack super complex social issues, but to do it in a way that doesn't feel like medicine. It does it in a way that actually feels a bit fun. It's a thrill ride because your heart is racing and your pulse is pounding. So it allows you then to take on things that if you had just told this story as a straight drama, folks might have tuned out. So I think it's always had a remarkable way of doing that. But I think particularly for Black folks, we're not the first and will not be the last, right? Like this is not a moment. I think it really is the beginning of a movement of storytellers. And just the way that the things that you've described, and also Lena Waithe, I got to shout out Lena, our executive producer. She opened the door for me to come in and to use my voice. And now I intend to open the door behind me for the next wave, because we're not alone. There is a massive wave of Black folks, but all kinds of folks who have been marginalized from these kinds of stories, and we need their stories because it's only going to make storytelling better. So I take immense, it's humbling, and honestly, it's an honor that I don't take lightly. Yeah.
Thank you. And Ashley, hi. I interviewed you in Atlanta years ago when you were on 24.
Oh, wow, what's up, man? Hi.
Hey there. Just a quick question for Deborah here. Now, your character is so multi-layered, and I mean, you go through it. And I'm just kind of wondering, what was the most fulfilling aspect of your character? Maybe a theme or just something that you were just so happy to bring to the forefront?
Her having her being given permission to be as angry as she wanted to be. Because I feel like a lot of us, there's this thing about, angry Black woman, and I don't think that they've even seen the anger that we probably should have for all the things that we've been through. If we're talking about racism and sexism, and then colorism, and then all the other isms, you know what I'm saying? So having, I've been on many projects that there's been a moment, and naturally, my natural instinct is, okay, my character is angry, she's upset. And I've been told no, we're gonna tone that down because we don't want this, And to come on this project and just to have that permission and just let her rip, for me, that was the most fulfilling. I mean, I feel like in my daily life now, I'm more comfortable with expressing when I've been slighted or when I'm upset or saying no, now because of that. So that was the most fulfilling thing for me.
Thank you. And I'm gonna need you to check your girl Betty. She's out of pocket.
Watching. Keep watching.
Ashley, this question is for you, and it's actually along the lines of Emmanuel's question to Deborah, is that your character is actually really multi-layered, but you can't always be angry. you had to do a lot of taking care of a lot of different people, and as Little was talking about, even navigate that white corporate world. Talk about the complexity of this role and the burden actually that it is in representing Black men.
I think. Sorry. I thought you were talking to me. I thought you were mentioning. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. I thought you mentioned Lucky. Go ahead.
I think just the weight of the character, and I've said it before that like I was actually pretty scared to take on this role, not because of just the complexities and the layers that I had to play in it, and I just wanted to make sure that I could do the part justice and bring Henry to life properly. I think what was difficult was just the layers that I had to play as Henry, and keeping that fine balance of restraint is like a word that really comes to mind when I'm thinking of Henry, because how I would react to something as Ashley in 2020, 2021 is very different to how Henry could deal with a situation. So it was constantly having this sort of like burden on his shoulder of making sure that he could be firm, but not be too aggressive where he could get in trouble, because the difference between Henry doing something then or saying the wrong thing could be life or death. Just like when there's a scene where 3 men are essentially trespassing on his property and they come and threaten him, and his daughters are in the house, and he has to strike the balance between being responsible for his family, but also protecting them at the same time, and making sure that these 3 gentlemen don't bully him or see him as weak, and then can attack his family. So it was constantly like striking that balance and finding that fine balance with Henry, which was it was difficult to play, and just being in the workplace and having to walk in the lobby and the receptionist tell him that he should be in the kitchen when really he's here as an engineer. But he can't be aggressive, he can't be rude, because he needs to keep the job, because he has to be responsible for his family. So not acting emotionally and acting responsibly and having rational thinking for the character.
I would just add too, like I worked in corporate, as you know, like have I actually gone into a bathroom like Henry and shoved paper towels down my throat to stifle a rage scream? No. Have I wanted to? Every day. So like, these are feelings that are still in 2020, 2021, very, very real. Yeah.
And that you can't bring it up. You feel like you can't even talk about it as well. See, these things are created to
well, God forbid you even remotely are deemed angry, even remotely.
Right. These things are used to keep us in our like they want to keep us in our place, right? So like angry Black woman, that's a myth that's been created. That's not a thing. That's not a real thing. Right. Like an aggressive, angry Black man, it's not a real thing. These are things that are put on top of us as people to keep control of us, right? So yeah. I hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the perspective from all of you guys on that. Thank you.
One of the scenes that struck me very much was the scene between Deborah and Melody. And it was a scene where Melody is talking about what she sees in the basement. And what I loved about that scene was the fact that Lucky believed her. And so my question for Deborah or Little was that important for you all to show that relationship between a mother and daughter, where the daughter can speak her truth to her mother and her mother believes her?
I was going to say that for me, that was a very touching scene, because I think that there's a problem with women being believed, especially Black women being believed when they experience any kind of violation. And so for me, that scene held that weight of just looking into her little eyes and just saying, I believe you. If no one else believes you, I know that you're telling the truth. I believe you. It definitely held that weight for me.
I would just add too, I love that about Lucky. It sounds so weird for me to love anything about it. I feel like weird as a writer. It's like, I love the part where, but I do love that scene. I also love when it's that scene, and also when Lucky asks Ruby, why are you my Ruby? And she says, because I sparkle. And the beautiful thing about Lucky and about Henry, they see their daughters. and they want their daughters to see themselves as they see them, right?
Yeah.
And so that's constantly being reinforced in a way that I find very moving.
Yeah, I think real quick, someone asked me some time ago, like why Lucky is called Lucky. And I thought to myself, I thought about how like in Nigerian culture and a lot of, because there's different Nigerian cultures, but, and I know with Yoruba people, we name, the parents and the elders name children based on what we think about them, based on what we want their lives to be moving forward, not based on what the world might say about them, not based on what they might go through. And so for me, I felt like, I don't know whether that was intentional or not, little Marvin, I felt like I always understood, you know, why she was named Lucky, because it was based on what the people in her community call her, what her family calls her, what her friends call her, not what, you know, about what she may go through in life. And so it was a beautiful moment for me. And as for Lucky, to be able to force that back into her daughters, to look into Ruby Lee's eyes and say, you know, why are you my Ruby? Just reminding her of who she is, no matter what you experience at school or out in the world. Why did we call you Ruby? You know, and just looking into Melody's eyes and just saying, or into Gracie Jean's eyes and just saying, like, I believe you, I see you. So yeah, it was just a beautiful thing for me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. We want to thank you for joining us today. This is an absolutely phenomenal piece of work that we're going to enjoy sharing, you know, to our various audiences. So again, thank you. And we look forward to seeing each of you many, many, many times as you continue on in your careers. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film critics, thank you for joining AAFCA Roundtables.
It's an honor.